The Sahara. Just hearing the name conjures images, doesn't it? Endless waves of golden sand, stretching to a shimmering horizon. A lone camel caravan silhouetted against a blood-red sunset. An ocean of dunes covering everything in sight. It's one of the most powerful images in our collective imagination. But here's the truth. That image is almost entirely wrong. Yes, the Sahara is the largest hot desert on Earth. It spans over 9 million square kilometers, covering most of North Africa. It's roughly the size of the United States, including Alaska. It is vast beyond comprehension. But the sand, the dunes that we associate with every desert movie ever made, they cover only about 15% of the Sahara. 15%. The rest is something else entirely. Rocky plateaus, gravel plains, volcanic massifs, ancient riverbeds that haven't seen water in thousands of years, mountains that rise from the dust like islands from a dry sea. So why does this matter? Because the Sahara is not what we think it is. And understanding what it actually is changes everything. The Sahara isn't empty. It is one of the most selective environments on Earth. It doesn't erase life. It filters it. Every creature that survives here, every plant that manages to bloom, every human community that has made this place home for thousands of years, they have all passed through a filter so unforgiving that it makes most of the planet look like a paradise. To understand how anything survives here, we need to understand how the Sahara actually works. Not the myth, the reality. Let's start with a question that seems simple, but isn't. Why is the Sahara a desert at all? You might think it's because it's far from the ocean. But that doesn't work. The Sahara sits right next to the Atlantic Ocean on its western edge, and the Mediterranean Sea to the north. Water is everywhere. And yet rain is almost nowhere. The answer lies not in the ground, but in the sky. Specifically, in a massive atmospheric circulation system called the Hadley Cell. Here's how it works. At the equator, the sun heats the air intensely. That hot, moist air rises, cooling as it ascends, and releasing its moisture as the torrential rainfall that feeds the Amazon and Congo rainforests. By the time that air reaches the upper atmosphere, it's dry. It then travels north and south, away from the equator, before cooling and sinking back toward the surface. And where does it sink? Right around 30 degrees latitude north and south. The Sahara sits roughly between 15 and 30 degrees north. This descending air is a lid on the atmosphere. It compresses, warms, and suppresses cloud formation. It creates a permanent zone of high pressure that refuses to let storms form. This is why the Sahara exists. Not because it's far from water, but because the atmosphere itself prevents rain from falling. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember how I said the Sahara borders the Atlantic? Along its western edge, in Mauritania and Western Sahara, you have one of the driest places on Earth. And yet, the ocean is right there. You can stand on the beach, look out at the Atlantic, and be in one of the most arid environments on the planet. This is the coastal paradox. The Canary Current, a cold ocean current flowing down from the north, cools the air above it. Cool air holds less moisture. And when that cool, stable air moves over the hot land, it doesn't rise and form clouds. It just sits there. The result? Fog, but no rain. Moisture you can feel on your skin, but never enough to drink. The desert, then, is not about the absence of water. It's about how air moves. It's about global systems operating at a scale so vast we can barely comprehend them, creating a filter that covers an entire continent. So if the Sahara isn't endless dunes, what is it? The Sahara is actually 3 distinct landscapes, each with its own rules, its own challenges, and its own forms of life. Geologists divide them into 3 categories: ergs, hamadas, and regs. Let's start with the one we know best, the ergs. These are the sand seas. The Grand Erg Oriental in Tunisia and Algeria covers nearly 200,000 square kilometers. The Erg Chebi in Morocco is smaller but more famous, with dunes rising 150 meters high. These are the places where wind has spent millions of years grinding rock into fine particles, then sculpting those particles into waves that march across the landscape. An erg is a living thing. The dunes move. They shift with the prevailing winds, slowly, inexorably, swallowing old roads and revealing ancient ruins. To survive in an erg, you must adapt to instability itself. Nothing stays where it was yesterday. Then there are the hamadas. These are rocky plateaus, exposed bedrock carved by wind, and the rare violent rain into strange and forbidding shapes. The Hamada du Guir in Morocco is a vast expanse of black rock, sharp-edged and broken, stretching to every horizon. Here, there is no sand to soften the landscape, just stone. The heat radiates from the rock with an intensity that can melt shoe soles. Water, when it falls, doesn't soak in. It runs off, carving deep wadis or dry riverbeds that flash floods without warning. Survival here means finding cracks, crevices, the rare places where water lingers just long enough for life to take hold. And finally, the regs, gravel plains, vast expanses of small wind-polished stones, packed tight as mosaic tiles. The regs are the oldest surfaces in the Sahara. Wind has removed all the fine particles over millions of years, leaving only the lag gravel behind. Driving across a reg feels like crossing another planet. Flat, endless, silent. Water here is almost non-existent. The stones absorb heat during the day and radiate it back at night, creating temperature swings that crack boulders. Why does this matter? Because life does not adapt to the desert. It adapts to specific microdeserts. The creature that survives in the Earg, burrowing into sand to escape the heat, would die on the Hamada. The plant that sends roots deep into reg gravel would find no purchase in shifting dunes. The Sahara is not one filter. It is dozens, layered on top of each other, each one testing life in its own way. So how does life pass through this filter? The first rule of survival in the Sahara is simple: disappear. When the sun rises and the temperature climbs past 40 degrees Celsius, when the ground becomes hot enough to fry an egg, when any exposed skin begins to burn within minutes, the only sensible thing to do is vanish. This is why so many Saharan creatures are nocturnal. The fennec fox, with its enormous ears that radiate heat and its furred paws that protect against burning sand, spends the day deep in its burrow, emerging only at night to hunt. The deathstalker scorpion, one of the most venomous on Earth, hides under rocks and in crevices until darkness falls. Even the camels, those icons of desert endurance, would prefer to rest during the heat of the day if given the choice. Disappearing also means going underground. The Sahara's soil, just a few centimeters down, can be 20 degrees cooler than the surface. Burrowing is not just an option. For many species, it's the only way to survive. Spiders, beetles, snakes, small mammals, they all dig. They create hidden cities beneath the sand and stone, emerging only when the filter relaxes its grip. But disappearing isn't just about hiding from heat. It's also about hiding from the sun itself. Many Saharan plants have evolved to be nearly invisible. The Rose of Jericho, a resurrection plant, curls into a tight ball when dry, looking like nothing so much as a dead tumbleweed. But add water and it unfurls in hours, turning green, producing seeds, then curling back into its dormant state to wait, sometimes for years, for the next rain. Disappear. Wait. Endure. This is the first lesson the Sahara teaches. But you cannot disappear forever. Eventually, every living thing needs water. This brings us to the second rule: concentrate around water. The Sahara is dry, but it is not completely waterless. Scattered across its vastness are oases, places where underground aquifers reach the surface, creating pockets of green in an ocean of brown. The oasis of Siwa in Egypt has been inhabited for thousands of years. The oasis of Timia in Niger is famous for its date palms and its gardens, hidden in a canyon in the middle of the Tenere Desert. Here, life doesn't just survive, it thrives. Birds, insects, reptiles, mammals, all gather in densities that seem impossible given the surrounding emptiness. But oases are rare. Far more common are wadis, dry riverbeds that fill with water only after rain, sometimes hundreds of miles away. A flash flood in the Atlas Mountains can send water rushing down wadis into the Sahara, transforming dry gravel into raging rivers for a few hours, a few days at most. And when the water recedes, life explodes. Seeds that have lain dormant for years germinate. Insects hatch. Animals come from miles around to drink and feed. The Ziz Valley in Morocco is one such system. Fed by snowmelt from the high Atlas, the Ziz River flows year-round in its upper reaches, then gradually sinks into the desert, creating a ribbon of green that supports date palms, agriculture, and entire communities. Here, the filter relaxes just enough to allow permanent settlement. Here, life concentrates. And then there is the Nile. The Nile is not just an exception, it is the exception. The longest river on Earth flows through the heart of the Sahara for over 2,000 kilometers, from Sudan through Egypt to the Mediterranean, without a single tributary. It is a ribbon of fresh water surrounded by absolute desert. Without the Nile, there would be no ancient Egypt, no pyramids, no pharaohs. Civilization itself in this part of the world depends entirely on water's ability to defeat the filter. But here is where the story takes its most surprising turn. The Sahara has not always been a desert. 10,000 years ago, this was a green and pleasant land. Lakes dotted the landscape, rivers flowed year-round. Elephants, giraffes, and hippos grazed along their banks. And humans lived here, fished here, painted here. We know this because they left us proof. In the Tassili Niger Plateau in southern Algeria, high in what is now one of the most remote and arid parts of the Sahara, the rock walls are covered with thousands of paintings and engravings. They show cattle with curved horns. They show people swimming. They show herds of animals that could not survive a single day in today's Sahara. These images are not speculation. They are documentary evidence. They are photographs carved in stone of a world that no longer exists. What happened? The monsoons moved. The African monsoon is driven by the same orbital cycles that cause ice ages. Every 20,000 years or so, the tilt of the Earth changes just enough to shift the monsoon rains northward, deep into the Sahara. When this happens, the desert turns green. Grasslands expand, lakes fill, rivers run, and when the monsoon retreats, the desert returns. This cycle has happened repeatedly over the past few 100,000 years. The last green Sahara ended about 5,000 years ago, yesterday in geological time. The people who painted those rocks didn't imagine a green Sahara. They painted what they saw. They painted their world. This changes everything. The Sahara is not a static, eternal desert. It is a system in motion. It expands and contracts on timescales that dwarf human history. Today's desert was once a grassland, and tomorrow's grassland may once again be a desert. So how do humans survive in a place that changes on such vast scales? For most of Saharan history, the answer was, keep moving. The nomadic peoples of the Sahara, the Tuareg, the Moors, the Tubu, developed a way of life perfectly adapted to the filter. They moved with the seasons, following rare rains to find pasture for their animals. They developed camels, not just as transportation, but as biological technology. A camel can go 2 weeks without water, losing up to a quarter of its body weight without harm. Its thick coat insulates it from the sun. Its wide feet keep it from sinking in sand. Its nostrils close completely during sandstorms. The camel is not just an animal in the Sahara. It is the difference between life and death. The nomads also built trade routes across the desert, connecting the Mediterranean to West Africa. Salt from the Sahara, gold from the south, slaves, textiles, books, all moved along these routes. Timbuktu, Gao, Gadams. These cities grew rich not despite the desert, but because of it. The filter that killed the unprepared became a highway for those who understood it. But not everyone moved. Some stayed. The fortified cities of the Sahara, like Chinguetti in Mauritania, were built to last. Their architecture, thick earthen walls, narrow streets, shaded courtyards, is a direct response to the filter. They capture every breath of wind, every drop of rare rain. They are designed to endure. But endurance has limits. Chinguetti, once a major center of Islamic learning with 20,000 inhabitants, now struggles with desert encroachment. Sand dunes creep toward its walls. The filter, it seems, never stops testing. And this brings us to the final truth about the Sahara. The desert is not finished. It is still coming. Today, the Sahara is expanding. Climate change, combined with natural cycles and human pressure on desert margins, is pushing the desert southward into the Sahel, the semi-arid region that borders it. Villages are buried. Farms are abandoned. People move. But expansion is not permanent. The orbital cycles that turned the Sahara green before will turn it green again. Not in our lifetimes, not in our children's lifetimes, but on timescales that the Earth keeps without us. The Sahara will be a grassland again. The filter will relax. And life, which is weighted in seeds and burrows and deep genetic memory, will return. This is the final lesson. The Sahara is not a dead place. It is not empty. It is not static. It is a system in constant, slow motion. It filters life, but it does not erase it. Life waits. Life adapts. Life returns. We began with a misconception. We imagined endless sand, an empty wasteland, a place where nothing could live. We end with a different truth. The Sahara is selective, yes. It is unforgiving, yes. But it is not empty. It is filled with life that has passed through the filter. Life that has learned to disappear, to concentrate, to wait, to move, to endure. The fennec fox in its burrow, the date palm at the oasis, the nomad following ancient trails, the rock art in Tassili, waiting 10,000 years to tell its story, the camel, that living ship of the desert, the seeds that sleep for decades, waiting for rain. This is not a place where life dies. This is a place where life refuses to die. The Sahara is not a desert of death. It is a desert of patience. And if we listen, if we look past the myths and the movies and the easy images, we can hear what it has to teach us. That life is more persistent than we imagine. That the filter does not defeat everything. That even in the most selective environment on Earth, something always finds a way. The Sahara is vast, it is ancient, it is changing, and it is, in its own strange and silent way, alive. If you want to see how nature tests life elsewhere, the next world is already waiting.